I read that you grew up in Alabama.
I did, Jesse. I grew up in Gaston, Alabama. I was just sharing. My brother, he's deceased now, but his name was Jesse as well.
Amazing.
So it's an honor to be sitting here talking with you. Uh, you kind of remind me of my brother, actually. But I grew up in Gaston, Alabama. We're talking in the 50s. I was born in 1952. I, interesting enough, never went to a black school until my junior year of college. So I integrated elementary, junior high, high school, University of Tennessee. It was a very, very racially dominated time. We think today is nothing like it was back then. Getting beaten, getting spit on, getting electric prodded. It was a challenging time.
So I grew up in Alabama as well, right outside of Montgomery, near Tuskegee, Eufaula, and all those areas.
I know that area well.
Yeah, and the last year of my high school, 1968, when they first started to integrate the schools, because I remember there were white teachers at my school for the first time, I did not experience what they call racism, and we're going to get into that in a minute, growing up in Alabama. So a lot of things that the blacks are complaining about when they complain about Jim Crow and slavery and all that, it looked like they don't know what they're talking about. They've just been brainwashed by other blacks and liberal whites who are trying to use them. What do you think of? So, Gordon, and then I want to ask you, what do you think about the complaints of black Americans today? You said you grew up you went to all-white school down in Alabama when the blacks and white was first coming together. Would you call that racism or hatred?
Which part? The part of coming together,
the way you were being treated while in an
the way I
all-white
was
school?
being treated was absolutely racism. Racism is defined as that I hate you. I think I'm superior to you. I think I'm better to you than you. That's really the definition of racism. And absolutely, we're around the same age. You're actually probably a few years older than me because I graduated high school in 1970. So it was the same experience. George Wallace, as you know, was the governor. We had a thing called freedom of choice, which meant that a parent, black or white, could send their kids to any school that they wanted to. The difference, however, Jesse, was George Wallace said, but your own, meaning that you can send your black kid to a all-white school, but we're not going to be there to give you safety. You're on your own. So my mother went to high school with Coretta King in Marion, Alabama. And so my mother was a leader when she came to Gaston in desegregation and the integration movement. So again, I went to an integrated elementary school. I integrated with others. Junior high, it was only 6 of us, 1,000 white kids. In Gaston High, in University of Tennessee, it was 18,000 white kids, and it was about 28 black kids. So I was in that first generation and first movement. And absolutely racism.
What's the difference between racism and hatred? Because I can see that our battle is a warfare between good and evil, right and wrong, and that the word racism is made up by race hustlers like the so-called civil rights movement people and the liberal whites. Those words are made. Is
that how you feel, Jesse, as a black man?
Yeah, that word is made up in order to divide and control and conquer. Whereas when I was growing up in Alabama, we knew that it was a battle between good and evil, right and wrong. There were good in all races. There were bad in all races. How would you define hatred or evil?
But you use a term. You call Martin Luther King a racial hustler?
Well, I don't think that was his intention when he first started out, but I think it came about once he allowed Jesse Jackson and all those other people to get involved. I think that changed the original meaning of the so-called, I guess, civil rights movement. They changed it and made it so that they can take over the hearts and minds of the people and call themselves leaders of the blacks?
Well, I do. This is going to be a great interview because you met your match here, Jesse. Uh,
You're,
so this is going to
that's
be a
right.
great interview. I don't get emotional. I'll be very intellectual and heartfelt.
Right on.
So get ready for it, okay?
All right.
I'm a college professor. I believe in allowing my students and to give them a perspective on life.
Right on.
So as a college professor, 12 years now, I'm glad to see you have a perspective. It's totally different than mine. So we can agree to disagree on our perspective. But I don't see it the way you saw it.
Define racism for me and then define evil.
I already defined racism.
And what do
to
you call, how do you define evil?
How do I find evil?
What's the definition of evil?
Evil for me, I don't know, evil for you, but evil for me is when you purposely, strategically do something wrong to hurt someone in a dark way. That's evil to me.
And so anyone can be evil and anyone can be so-called racist. Am I right about that?
Absolutely. Absolutely, Jesse.
So the blacks who are trying to control other blacks, the uppity blacks who are trying to control the lower class blacks, are they racist?
I don't consider that racist if I'm trying to control someone. It's not certainly not right, Jesse. That's wrong behavior.
Is it evil?
And I talk about that, Jesse, in my, I have 5 books. I talk about that in Racism from the Eyes of a Child. I go into things like colorism and how that effect was. And, in Emancipation of Slaves Through Music, one of my books, I talk about in slavery how if you got to work in the big house, that you were considered an elitist over the other slaves. So I somewhat understand the direction you're going with that question. That has happened before in America for blacks, black on black.
Yeah. So am I right when I say that the uppity blacks who are trying to control the lower class blacks, are they being racist toward those blacks? Yes or no?
I have to think about that in the context that you're meaning, that someone that I can only assume when you say uppity, I have to have more definition of your definition of uppity. I don't use
The
that
black
term.
politicians and the black so-called professors and some of the black preachers who are feeding these blacks all this crap and have them acting out while they're sitting back collecting the money and collecting status. Is that racism?
No, I don't think it might be ignorance, but I don't agree with you that professors and ministers would be defined as uppity. I would define them as possibly leaders in their community. I would define them as educated. I would define them. We can't give a whole blanket definition, even racism. We can't say every white person is racist. We can't say every successful black person is uppity. That would be disingenuous to do that.
Why when I was growing up down in Alabama there, we didn't need leaders as people. We have families, we have fathers and mothers and grandmothers and grandfathers, and they were our examples growing up. Once we became adults, we didn't need leaders. Why do blacks need leaders? What happened to them that they can't lead their own lives?
Well, I think, Jesse, I study a lot in organizational culture. Leadership is needed in all aspects. We have leadership in our family. We typically, that leader is the man in the family. We have leaderships in corporation. That's typically the president or chairman of the corporation. We have leaderships in churches. That's normally the minister. So leadership is certainly required because that's who brings people together. That's the person that gives the direction and has empathy for the people that work with them. Leadership is certainly required. There's leadership in your organization. That's someone, you didn't do the microphones today. Someone else did that.
Right, but they're not. I'm not their leader. They work for me, but I'd like to know what happened to the blacks that even the men act like the women. I understand the woman need a man over her to guide her the right way to go. Otherwise, she goes out of control. But what happened to the black men that they act like women and they look to somebody to lead them? And
You mean currently the younger generation?
the
Because I
older,
don't see that in my. I'm 68 years old. I don't see that in my generation.
right. Well, from your generation down, from our generation, that's when it seemed to have started. What happened to the black men that they would look to another man to lead them? How did they lose a sense of
Oh,
self-control?
I understand your question better. I don't think leadership. I don't think leadership is defined by gender. You have many women that are effective leaders.
Really?
Absolutely.
Can you name one?
Well, the president of Xerox Corporation. You've heard of Xerox before, right?
I know, but she's not a leader. She worked for Xerox.
She's not currently, but she
Right,
was
but
a
she has to
president.
follow the manual. She's not like a leader. A leader is someone who is the light of a family. The man is the head of his wife and children.
Okay,
And
are
the
we
wife
talking in a family setting leadership?
No,
Or
I'm
are we
talking in a non-family. The blacks are looking to the black men are looking to other men and women to lead them. It's just so abnormal, and it's the blacks who are the only ones that are living that way. What happened to them
What do you
along the
call
way?
what do you call the president of the United States? Is he a states? Is that person a leader of the country?
He represents the country. He looks out for what is best for the country, but he's not an individual leader of anyone.
But looking out what's best, is that not leadership? Part of
Yeah,
leadership?
but it's nothing direct. You know what I'm talking about. Like the blacks, they look to Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, Louis Farrakhan, the Wicked Witch of the West, Maxine Waters, the NAACP. They're out riding and carrying on now like animals instead of being common sense kind of people.
Jesse,
What
I
happened to
can't.
them?
Jesse, I can't subscribe to that type of dialogue and behavior. I have a different view than yours. I think it's important as Black people that we uplift and uphold each other, especially in these challenging times. We certainly don't need right now, this moment, in all of the challenges of the coronavirus and all of the challenges that we've heard of just recently in Minneapolis, in Georgia, in Louisville, Kentucky. We don't need this type of dialogue. It's very dangerous. We should be uplifting our Black people right
But
now, not tearing them down.
who is leading the blacks who are supposed to be leading other blacks? Who are leading them?
Currently, who's leading
Yeah,
them?
who leads
The
Jesse
people you
Jackson
just
and the
said, like
NAACP and all?
Jesse Jackson and
I'm sorry?
who are leading. Just like, I mean, when you say that, you're saying you define Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton as Black leaders. So your question is who's leading them? Who's
Yes.
giving them direction?
Right.
I don't know. You would have to ask them that. I don't know if there's someone leading them.
That's
I'm not aware of that.
That's a very good point. I want to move on, but that's a good point because if I was the blacks, I would ask, if you're trying to be my leader, who is leading you and who is leading that person? And if you have sense enough to lead your own life, why don't I have the common sense to lead my own life?